Maya Chen stood perfectly still as the morning sun beat down on the training grounds of Fort Brenner. At 22, she was the youngest recruit in the history of the 7th Special Operations Sniper Unit, and its only woman. The rifle in her hands, a custom M24, felt like an extension of her body despite Commander James Reeves's insistence that it was too much weapon for her 5'4" frame. "Chen, you're up!" Reeves called, not bothering to hide the skepticism in his voice. A decorated veteran with 3 tours and 17 confirmed kills, Reeves had made his opinion clear from day one. Women didn't belong in sniper units, especially not his elite team. Maya approached the firing position with measured steps. Her test scores at the academy had broken records, but paper achievements meant nothing here. The other recruits watched with a mixture of curiosity and doubt, all except Staff Sergeant Miller, who gave her an almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. "Target at 800 meters, Reeves announced, louder than necessary. "Standard conditions. Show us what the Academy thinks is special." Maya settled into position, controlling her breathing as she had thousands of times before. Her father had taught her to shoot when she was 12, hunting in the mountains of Colorado. By 16, she could hit targets most adults couldn't see. The military had simply refined what was already there. Her first shot missed by inches. "Guess those academy scores were just beginner's luck," Reeves said, triggering laughter from several. Team members Maya adjusted, recalculating. Her second shot hit center mass. "Even a broken clock is right twice a day," muttered Reeves, but his smirk had faltered slightly. That night, after the barracks had gone quiet, Maya slipped out with her rangefinder and notebook. The base had a restricted training area that extended into the mountains, perfect for what she needed. For 3 hours, she practiced reading wind patterns, making micro-adjustments, and logging data that most snipers would consider excessive. This became her nightly ritual. While others slept, Maya trained. While they socialized at the mess hall, she studied ballistics. Her fellow recruits began to notice her absence, her perpetual exhaustion, but also her steadily improving scores. 6 weeks into training, Sergeant Miller found her at the range after midnight. "You're going to burn out, Chen," he said, startling her. "With respect, sir, I can't afford to," she replied, not looking up from her calculations. Miller studied her notes. "You're developing your own formulas for extreme distance. Standard tables don't account for the barometric anomalies in this region," she explained, "and they're calibrated for shooters with different physical parameters." "Different from you, you mean?" Maya finally looked up. "The physics doesn't care if I'm a woman, sir. The bullet doesn't know who pulled the trigger. I just need to give it the right information." Miller nodded slowly. "Reeves is hard on you because he thinks you'll break. Don't." 3 months later, the unit received deployment orders. A high-value target had been located in a compound in mountainous terrain overseas. Intelligence suggested a 48-hour window before he would move again. During the mission briefing, Reeves assigned positions. "Miller and Jacobs will take the primary position here." He indicated a ridge overlooking the compound. "Chen, you're on communication duty with me at base camp." Maya's heart sank, but she maintained her composure. This was her first deployment. She had expected to be sidelined. 20 hours into the operation, everything changed. A sudden sandstorm forced Miller and Jacobs to relocate, and during the move, Jacobs severely sprained his ankle. The target was scheduled to move in less than 6 hours. "Chen is the only other shooter we have, sir," Miller said over the radio. "I can't make this shot alone." There was a long silence before Reeves responded. "Send her up, but this is on you." "If she fails, Miller," Maya gathered her gear, her heart pounding but her hands steady. The 4-hour climb to the new position was grueling, but she arrived with time to spare. Miller had already set up observation. "Target building is there," he pointed. "But there's a problem. The only angle is from that outcropping, and it's 2,500 meters. Maya's breath caught. The world record for a combat sniper shot was just over 2,400 meters. "Commander knows this distance?" she asked. Miller's expression was grim. "Yes. He thinks it's impossible. For any of us." Maya unpacked her rifle and began her calculations. The environmental conditions were complex: shifting winds, significant elevation drop, and temperature fluctuations between her position and the target. When Reeves came on the radio for a status update, Maya explained her approach. A harsh laugh came through the static. "Chen, nobody makes that shot their first time in the field. Fall back, and we'll develop a new plan." "Sir, with respect, I can make this shot," Maya replied firmly. "You have one attempt, Chen. Miss, and you're pulling back immediately." Maya tuned everything out as she finalized her calculations. Miller watched in silence as she made minute adjustments to her scope and position that contradicted standard protocols. The target appeared exactly when intelligence predicted. A man in a black robe, surrounded by guards, emerged onto a balcony. Maya took a deep breath, then another. She adjusted slightly for a last-second breeze. Then she squeezed the trigger. Through her scope, she watched as the target dropped instantly. A clean hit. For several seconds, silence dominated the radio. Then Reeves's voice, uncharacteristically subdued. "Confirmed hit. Target eliminated. Good shot, Chen." The extraction was tense, but successful. Back at base, Maya expected the usual dismissal from Reeves. Instead, he approached her as she cleaned her rifle. "That shot shouldn't have been possible," he said, his voice gruff but lacking its usual edge. "The math worked out, sir," she replied simply. "The math," he repeated, shaking his head. "You rewrote the damn equations." "I adapted them, sir." Reeves studied her for a long moment. "The unit is running night exercises next week. You'll be taking point on developing the distance protocols." It wasn't an apology, but it was acknowledgement. And in Reeves's world, that was rarer than a 2,500-meter shot. 6 months later, Maya stood before a new group of recruits, 2 of them, women. Behind her, Commander Reeves addressed the group. "This is Sergeant Chen," he said, no trace of laughter in his voice now. "When she tells you something is possible, you'd better believe it." The Blackwater International Precision Shooting Championship sprawled across the dusty Nevada landscape like an armed fortress. Competitors from 38 countries had gathered, their high-end equipment worth more than Layla Vasquez's childhood, home in East Los Angeles. At 24, Layla stood out not just as one of the few women, but as someone who clearly didn't belong among the military veterans and professional marksmen with their sponsor-laden gear bags. Her rifle, a modified Remington 700 that had belonged to her grandfather, drew stares. Where others had cutting-edge carbon fiber stocks and custom titanium components, Layla's weapon showed its age and heritage, a patchwork of handcrafted modifications and practical fixes wrapped in worn leather grips darkened by decades of use. Commander Arturo Santiago, head judge and 5-time champion-turned-competition director, didn't bother hiding his disdain during equipment inspection. "This is what you bring to Blackwater?" he asked, turning the rifle in his hands. His crisp uniform bore the insignia of 3 different elite military units. "The entry fee alone could have bought you something from this century." "It shoots true," Layla said simply, resisting the urge to snatch her grandfather's rifle back. Santiago handed it back with a theatrical sigh. "Your stance is all wrong, too. I watched you during practice. You're breaking every fundamental rule." "Not breaking," Layla corrected quietly. "Adapting." Santiago's laugh echoed across the inspection area, drawing attention from nearby competitors. "The qualifying round starts at 0800. Don't be disappointed when reality hits." As she walked away, Layla's mind drifted to the hills above her grandfather's small ranch in New Mexico. She was 9 when Abuelo first placed a rifle in her hands. Not the Remington, but an old .22 that kicked less than a hiccup. "You're built differently than I am, Nieta," he had explained, adjusting her stance in a way that contradicted the illustrations in his dog-eared marksmanship manual. The book was written for men built like me. We need to find what works for your body. For years, they experimented. While other children played video games, Layla and Abuelo spent weekends calculating trajectories and testing how slight adjustments in grip affected accuracy at increasing distances. He taught her to read the wind by watching dust and grass, rather than relying solely on instruments. When her slight frame struggled with standard positions, they developed alternatives that used her body's natural balance points. "The bullet doesn't care how you look when you shoot," he would say. "It only follows physics." When Abuelo died 3 years ago, he left Layla his rifle and a leather-bound notebook filled with their collaborative ballistics research. 2 months later, the bank sent the first foreclosure notice on the family ranch. The qualifying round eliminated half the competitors. Despite equipment that judges deemed quaint and techniques that drew mockery, Layla finished 12th, just enough to advance. During the second day of competition, she arrived to find her rifle case had been tampered with. The carefully calibrated scope had been adjusted, subtly enough that many shooters might not notice until firing their first shot. Layla recalibrated quickly, making the adjustments without a proper test fire. She had to rely on memory and instinct for her first competitive shot at 1,200 meters. When the target lit up with a perfect hit, Santiago's eyebrows rose slightly. That evening, another competitor approached her in the dining hall. Someone said, "You're shooting to save your grandfather's ranch," the woman said. "A former Olympic biathlete from Norway." Layla nodded cautiously. "The prize would cover what we owe." "Santiago won't make it easy for you. He believes certain people don't belong in this sport." The woman's expression hardened. "He said the same about me 5 years ago. By the semifinals, only 8 shooters remained." Layla had advanced to 4th position despite increasingly difficult conditions, crosswinds that seemed to affect her station more than others, last-minute target changes, and a mysterious power issue that caused her electronic rangefinder to fail during a crucial round. The night before the finals, Layla couldn't sleep. She sat cross-legged on her hotel bed, her grandfather's notebook open before her, reviewing his handwritten notes about extreme distance shooting. One passage stood out. "At distances beyond what's considered possible, trust what you feel more than what you calculate. Numbers get you close. Instinct takes you home." The final challenge was announced at dawn. A moving target at 2,500 meters, a distance that pushed beyond the effective range of most competition rifles. Each finalist would get 1 attempt. When Layla's turn came, Commander Santiago stood nearby, arms crossed. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the gathered spectators, "our next shooter brings us traditional approaches." His emphasis triggered knowing laughter. Layla ignored him, settling into her unconventional stance. She laid prone, but at an angle most instructors would immediately correct. Her left leg bent outward in a way that looked awkward, but stabilized her slight frame perfectly. She breathed deeply, feeling the Nevada desert air, hotter and drier than New Mexico, but familiar enough. The wind shifted slightly. Layla adjusted, not according to the standard wind charts most competitors used, but based on her grandfather's alternative calculations that accounted for terrain-specific air current behaviors. Santiago laughed loudly when she made her final adjustment, a shift that contradicted conventional wisdom for the conditions. "That's not how physics works," he said to another judge, not bothering to lower his voice. Layla squeezed the trigger. The moving target, a 12-inch disc traveling at irregular intervals along a distant track, shattered at its center. The electronic scoring system froze momentarily before displaying the result. Perfect hit, 2,500 meters. Silence fell across the range. Then the Norwegian biathlete began to clap, followed quickly by growing applause from the crowd. Santiago's face hardened as he verified the shot through his spotting scope. "Lucky," he muttered, but his expression betrayed his astonishment. When Layla accepted the championship trophy in check, She didn't mention the ranch or the foreclosure. Instead, she thanked her grandfather and announced she would use part of the winnings to establish a scholarship for young shooters from underrepresented backgrounds. 6 months later, Layla returned to the ranch, now secure in her family's name, to find 3 local girls waiting at the gate. They had rifles of various conditions, some clearly hand-me-downs, others bargain models. "We heard you teach shooting," one said nervously. "Different than how they teach at school." Layla smiled, thinking of Abuelo. "The bullet doesn't care who you are," she said, opening the gate. "It only follows physics. Come on in." Behind the main house, she'd converted part of the property into a proper range. A framed photo hung on the wall of the small classroom. Layla at the moment of victory, Santiago's stunned face just visible in the background.